Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about Kentucky. From drivers and lone homeowners across the state, people who saw things they still can't explain. But before we begin, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now let's start. Eamon usually runs the after-hours specimen pickups for the lab's Indiana route, but on New Year's Eve, I started scanning barcodes at 5, aiming to finish by midnight. The lab gave me a stubby hatchback with a cooler bay bolted in the back, magnetic sign on the door, clipboard sliding around the passenger floor. My loop was simple: clinic in Lawrenceburg, tiny practice near Franklin, then a web of numbered county roads. The job was easy if the seals matched the forms. No one bothered me. If there was an extra pickup, I could tack it on and keep going. The first weird thing barely registered. Outside Waldron, my GPS froze, then jumped my location backward a quarter mile. Happens in patchy areas. The second was a mailbox with Marin hand-painted across the side, sitting at the end of a gravel drive marked by 4 fence posts. I noticed it because the nurse at Lawrenceburg had the same last name. 10 minutes later, another Marin mailbox, same sloppy lettering, but shorter drive and different number. I figured the name was common. At Franklin, the nurse handed me 2 coolers, signed her usual cramped signature, and said she had an urgent extra pickup in Columbus. She gave me a rural route number and a side road not on my map. GPS and backup apps both failed to find it. She wrote directions instead: left at a closed feed store, past a water tower, second right after a cattle guard. I noted my mileage, loaded up, and left. I found the water tower, found the cattle guard, no second right. The only one I saw ended in a loop that spit me back onto the main road. On my second pass, the same Marin mailbox appeared, chip in the paint by the flag. I pulled over to call the clinic. No signal. 1 bar blinked on, then dropped. It was probably just repeated landmarks. Still, the tape on the hinge of the flag was identical. I decided to skip the add-on and call it in from town. I turned at the next drive and saw a man standing off the road where the ditch met a fence. Long jacket sleeves, hands hidden. I gave a 2-finger wave. He stepped forward, then stopped. I kept driving. A left turn a mile ahead should have taken me straight toward Columbus. Instead, the pavement narrowed to 1 lane. 3 orange cones blocked the road with a hand-painted stop checkpoint sign. No vehicles, no people in uniform. Another local traffic only sign leaned against a post. Then a man stepped out from behind the cones, same jacket, same half-step hesitation as the guy by the fence. He stopped at my window. I cracked it 2 inches. "This road's closed," he said. "For how long?" "Tonight." I told him I was a courier headed to Columbus. He pulled a folded scrap from his sleeve and slid it inside. "Use that, local cut-through." I rolled the window up, reversed, and turned around. He didn't move. The note listed a road I didn't know, a house number, and an arrow pointing the wrong way for the county grid. The distance one. 7 miles was close enough to try. At 1:08, I passed a driveway to a low building. Numbers on the mailbox didn't match the paper. I didn't turn. At 2:04, the Marin mailbox appeared again. I pulled over, dug the atlas out of the glove box. On paper, this road ran straight for 9 miles, no loops. Yet, here I was. The note on my seat had rotated, arrow now pointing toward my door. I shoved it under my clipboard, restarted the car, and took the next left. 10 minutes later, a sign for a historical site pointed right. I took it for the pavement, not the landmark. At the crest of a hill, a man stood in the middle of the lane, hands in his sleeves. I slowed just enough to pass. I wanted a landline. The atlas showed a store near the main drag, closed, but a gas station further up was lit. The clerk eyed me like he was deciding something. "You lost? Courier run. Need a state road to Columbus. Phone's useless," he nodded. "Don't take the back roads tonight." "Closed?" "They're not closed. You just don't want them. I told him I'd loop past the same mailbox 3 times and asked to borrow the phone. He pointed me to it. Neither the clinic nor the lab hotline connected. You see anybody in the road, he asked. Yes, 3 times. He nodded like that was enough. Go back the way you came. Turn left. Stay on the state route till the interstate. Don't take shortcuts. Don't stop unless it's a cruiser. Outside, the folded note was at my feet by the pump. I didn't touch it. Inside the car, it was on the passenger seat. I shoved it into my trash bag, knotted it, and left. State route, steady speed. GPS came back, then froze. Odometer stuck on the same reading for 3 miles. The clock stopped. A local traffic-only sign stood at marker 12. At marker 10, the Marin mailbox sat half in the shoulder. I kept going. The phone buzzed, voicemail timestamped 10 minutes ahead. My own voice said, "Don't stop." I didn't. I turned onto a narrow road. 100 yards in, 3 cones and plywood blocked the lane. A figure behind it said, "Show badge." Open door. I held my placard to the glass. Open door. I shifted into reverse. The plywood slid aside. Same jacket, same man. He tried my door handle locked, then pulled a short piece of rebar or a lug wrench from his sleeve. I lowered the glass an inch, angled for the ditch. The tool tapped the door. I pressed the gas, took the ditch shallow, scraped the undercarriage, and passed the cones without looking back. A few miles later, the odometer jumped forward, clock 2. Notifications flooded my phone. I ignored them. Passed an empty county cruiser parked sideways in a gravel lot. At the hospital complex, I swiped into the receiving dock. When I opened the hatch for the first cooler, a neatly folded paper sat on top of the seal I'd closed myself. I set it on the ground, stepped on it, and left it there. Dropped off the coolers, signed the forms, and checked the car in. Then I walked to my own car, pulled onto the interstate, and didn't look back. By then, I'd been doing deliveries for almost a year, covering all of Brookhaven and the long, twisty county roads that branched out from it. After that much time, I could have driven half my usual routes with my eyes closed. I didn't, obviously, but you get to a point where the turns, the landmarks, the rhythm of each drive just settle into your bones. You stop thinking about them. That night was cold and still. Not snow on the ground cold, but the kind of dry, sharp air that makes your knuckles ache on the steering wheel if you've been outside too long. I was already on the home stretch of my shift, looking forward to clocking out, when the ticket printer at the counter spat out one last order. Large pepperoni. Cash on delivery. The address didn't ring a bell. I glanced at it a second time, wondering if maybe I'd just never been sent that way before. It wasn't unusual. Some stretches of the county only got an order once in a blue moon. I pulled the insulated bag off the hook and was halfway to the door when Mason from the make line called over to me. Mason was one of those guys who had a joke for everything, usually with a sarcastic twist. But when I looked over, the smirk was gone. He said, "Don't go inside, no matter what." I stopped. "What? Just don't," he said again, like that was all the explanation I needed. Then he turned back to the oven without another word. The thing was, it didn't sound like a joke. It landed heavier than I wanted it to. I told myself it was nothing, just Mason being weird, and stepped out to my car. The first stretch of the drive was routine, same streets, same stoplights. But after the last gas station, the road narrowed, twisting into the kind of dark where your high beams only make the trees look thicker. About 5 minutes from the address, I spotted headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I figured it was just someone heading home, but they didn't pass me. They just drew closer, until the inside of my car was washed in white. I eased off the gas. They slowed down too. I sped up, they matched me exactly. At the next stop sign, a lonely 4-way out in the middle of nothing, the car pulled up beside me. The driver's window rolled down, and I caught a quick look at him. Thin face, baseball cap pulled low. His mouth was moving fast, like he was saying something important. But between the idle of both engines and the cold night air, I couldn't hear a thing. I shook my head and kept my hands on the wheel. When the light flipped green, I accelerated hard enough to feel my tires slip for a second. He kept pace, pulling into my lane just enough to make me tense before drifting back over. Then, without warning, he gunned it forward and swerved sharply in front of me. My brakes locked on the thin frost, sending my car into a short, ugly skid. His tires shrieked, his back end swung, and for half a second I thought he was going to roll the thing. Instead, his front bumper dove into the shallow ditch beside the road. Dirt and weeds flew into the air as his wheels spun uselessly. I didn't stop. I didn't even look directly at him as I passed. 3 minutes later, I pulled up to the house. It was a faded ranch with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch that sagged in places. The porch light burned a strange yellow, brighter than it should have been, cutting a sharp circle in the dark around it. I parked at the bottom of the short gravel drive and carried the pizza up. No answer to the first knock, no answer to the second. I rang the bell and stood there, shifting the bag from one hand to the other. That's when I noticed the porch light wasn't wired the way porch lights usually are. A thick orange extension cord ran from the fixture, down the side of the door frame, and through a narrow gap in the front door. It disappeared inside. Something about that made me stop cold. I stepped back, looking through the narrow window beside the door. The hallway inside was dark. For the briefest moment, I thought I saw movement near the back, but it was gone before I could be sure. I called the number on the ticket. It rang until it went to voicemail. No sound came from inside. Standing there, holding a cooling pizza under that buzzing yellow light, I thought about Mason's warning. I set the bag down on the porch, knocked one more time quick, loud, and turned to head back to my car. The drive back to town took longer because I avoided the road I'd come in on. Every turn felt deliberate, like I was trying to lose someone even though I hadn't seen another car since leaving the house. When I walked into the shop, Mason gave me a look like he already knew how it went. "They answer?" "No," I said, "and I think someone was in there." I told him about the car, the man waving for me to roll down my window, the extension cord. His expression didn't change much, but the corners of his eyes tightened. Then he told me something I didn't like. When the order came in, the guy's voice had been strange, slow, deliberate, like he was reading each word off a card. And when Mason asked for the delivery address, there was this long pause before the man finally said it, long enough that Mason thought the line had gone dead. "I think the guy in the car and the guy in the house were the same," I said. "Maybe," Mason said, "or maybe there was never anyone in that house at all." He called the sheriff's department right there at the counter. They said they'd send someone out. No one ever followed up. I'm 34 years old. The Saturday roster at Redgate Baptist Cemetery has my name on it, so I sign in and start the audit with a clipboard, a tape, and the county GPS puck clipped to my belt. Deacon Harrell hands me a laminated map with rows A through M and neat squares stamped with old family names that repeat across Hendry County. My task is plain: walk every row, note each headstone's position, compare it with the map, flag anything off, and send the coordinates to the county office in Larkspur before evening. Rows A through C fall within a foot of the diagram, which is fine for the forms. I check boxes, photograph the stamped row plates, and keep moving. The gravel lane bends through cedars and splits the place into upper and lower terraces. The map marks a tin shed at the bend. The shed is exactly where the paper says it is, so I settle into the rhythm. The tape pulls out, the pencil records, the work advances. Row E runs long. The diagram shows 13 plots. I count 15 markers before the lane. Double stones sometimes skew the count, so I measure. The spacing gives me 15 clean widths, each right on 42 inches, and no void wide enough to hide an extra. I circle E and write +2. The two extras carry a last name I've never seen locally, both on temporary plastic sticks. That isn't unusual after recent burials, so I keep going. I set my clipboard on a flat granite stone to free my hands and pull the GPS puck. I logged the corner of row F, clip the device back, and reach for the clipboard. It isn't on the top anymore. It leans against the base. I didn't knock it. The pencil remains clipped where I left it. I put it back on the top and keep working. By row H, the map and the ground disagree again. The path between H and I narrows on the paper to a single lane, but out here I can cross without brushing a marker. I measure the gap, 9 feet, not 4. That's not trivial. 9 feet can hide 2 plots. I write it down. My tape catches on a metal urn at the corner of a stone. I lift the urn, finish the measurement, and turn to set it back. The urn sits exactly where it started, aligned, unshifted. I end the note and move on. The shed door has a hasp but no lock. Inside are plastic flags and a rusted yard roller. On the floor, someone lined up coffee cans with hand-lettered labels, each filled with screws and short lengths of chain. I take a few flags and close the door. The hasp seats without quite catching. I tug it anyway and leave it. Row J runs straight. I flag both corners, log the points, and find a pace that makes the numbers stack the way they should. On the second pass, something changes. 10 minutes earlier, the second stone from the lane read Hollands. Now it reads Pate. I check the photo I just took. The picture shows Hollands. The stone at my feet says Pate. I walk 2 plots north, then 3 south, and back to check the short run. The names are shuffled in a way that doesn't match the first set. I look down and see my boot prints on the dust of a flat top, 1 clean set of treads. I open 3 earlier photos. They show Hollands where I remember it. I take new shots with the J-Lane sign in frame and keep the map unchanged for now. A charcoal sedan idles by the church. The driver steps out, looks around without settling on any one thing, glances at his phone, and lifts a hand when I lift mine. He wears a work shirt with no name patch. He sits on the low brick ledge and stares past the grounds toward the road. I return to the audit. At noon, I eat on the tailgate and enter the morning's coordinates into the tablet. Each point stamps with a time. The string runs forward in order except for one in the middle marked 3:27. The date is right, the hour is wrong by nearly 9. The point lines up with the spot where Hollands turned into Pate. I tap to refresh the metadata. The time won't change. My phone clock matches the truck dash. I enter the rest and mark the anomaly with an asterisk. Harold comes back around 1 in a blue pickup and leans on the bed rail. I hand him the map. He squints, nods as if he can see what I circled, and says the path between H and I hasn't moved since his father mowed it. He adds that he'll return before 3 to lock the church because he left a binder inside. He points at the shed and says, "Leave that as you found it." I tell him I will. The sedan sits alone now without the driver. I glance at the shoulder for tracks out of habit, then decide to stick to the rows. In L, a plastic wreath leans against a stone. The family name matches one I logged earlier in D. I carry the wreath to that surname in D and prop it there. On my return through L 5 minutes later, the wreath rests where I first found it. I look for a duplicate. There isn't one. I log both placements and add family preference to the margin, perimeter check, as required. The back fence dips at the creek but sits wired tight. The front gate uses a slide and chain. I test the slide halfway closed and then open it again so cars can turn around. When I come back from the corner stake, the gate stands braced wide with the slide hard against the post and the chain hung the way the church sets it for Sunday mornings. I don't change it. I write, front gate slide holds open. The sedan's trunk now stands open. No one is nearby. Inside are a bag of seed, a single cinder block, and a clean spare tire. I call out in case the driver needs a hand with the block. No one answers. I shut the trunk because the hinge looks tired, and strain at full extension isn't wise. The quarter panel shows a fresh glove mark right where my arm would have passed if I'd leaned. My sleeve is clean. At the shed, the hasp hangs free. The staple above the hole shows a grit arc like something slid against it. The row of coffee cans stands in reverse order from how I remember them, the red-lidded one now at the start instead of the end. I had noticed the red lid because it caught my eye earlier. I put the cans back in forward order and seat the hasp with a twig through it. It's a simple fix that keeps a door from drifting. Harold returns at 10 minutes to 3, finds the key in his chest pocket, and ducks into the church for the binder. I ask if Pate shows up in J anywhere else on their ledger. He turns the talk to next month's fish fry and parking, then waves off. He tells me to lock the gate if I finish after he leaves. He doesn't mention the sedan. By 3:15, I'm down to one box in the far lower corner, a lot marked reserved on the map. I save it for last because it sits downhill from the trash barrel and attracts ribbon and wire. The marker is a temporary stake with a laminated card in a sleeve. The surname reads as some other family. The date at the bottom predates me by a decade. I photograph the card, mark the corner, and start back up the slope. Halfway up, I check the image for legibility. The photo now shows my last name on the card. I jog back down, kneel, and read the physical card again. It does not match my name. I take 4 more photos with the lane sign and frame, the church roof wedge, the creek angle. Each saved image shows my name. The live view shows the printed family. The file shows me. I lay the phone on the ground, unlock it, and trigger a shot with my headphone button so my hands are out of frame. The gallery still shows my name. I pull the stake, fold the laminated card, tuck it under my arm, and stand to carry it to the church office because the template needs to be replaced if someone made a joke or a mistake. I look down and see an empty sleeve on my arm. The card I thought I held sits back in the sleeve, in the ground where it started. I pick the stake up by the crossbar, carry it 5 paces to the gravel lane, and lay it flat by the culvert. I return to the bare square to photograph the empty ground for the record. The new image shows the stake upright again and my hand leaving the frame. The grass in front of me is bare except for my boot scuffs. The stake still lies by the culvert, exactly where I placed it. The sedan crosses my mind, so I check the lot. The trunk is shut where I left it. The driver's door sits latched. The radio antenna bends at a sharper angle than earlier, like weight pressed it. I inventory my kit as if wrapping up: tape, pencil, flags, tablet, puck. 2 flags are missing. I scan for bright orange. Row H shows 2 flags marking the long path I measured earlier, one at the start, one at the end. I pull the first and pocket it. I leave the second. Removing it would mean proving I didn't leave a necessary marker by mistake, and I can't produce that proof right now. A man appears from the road, walking fast, holding a clipboard I didn't see before. He stops when he sees me, checks the clipboard, then tucks it under his arm. "County?" he asks. "Today?" I say. He nods like that matches something he carries in his head. "See a dog? Yellow collar? Big." "No," I say. "Your trunk was open earlier. I shut it." "Appreciate it," he says, and heads for the sedan. He opens the trunk, closes it, opens it again, then shuts it with a quick palm. He gets in, idles, turns the engine off, steps out, and walks toward Jay with his clipboard. I try to spot a patch on his shirt. There isn't one. He cuts into L, drops out of view because the ground rises, and doesn't reappear. After 5 minutes, I walk the same line. There's no one in L. A clipboard sits on the ground near the 3rd marker. It's blank, no forms, just a single typed line at the top. Row L verify. I set it on a stone and call out once. In the lot, the sedan door opens and closes. The engine starts, the car reverses, pulls onto the road, and leaves. No driver is visible through the glass. I carry the clipboard to the open gate and lay it on the sedan's hood spot like a lost and found for return. The chain hangs looped through the slide, but not locked. I slide the gate closed, let the loop hang so the first arrival can lift it without extra steps, and then I stop. I count backward from 5 and reopen the gate, setting the chain back on its hook the way the church prefers it for weekend access. I circle once more to the shed because the coffee lid bothers me. The gate stands open at my back. On the asphalt outside the fence sits a lid with a red ring. I step through, leave it, and go to the shed. The hasp hangs open again. The twig lies on the ground 2 feet away. Inside, the coffee cans are back in the reversed order I corrected. I say, I'm putting them forward now. Not as a conversation, but as a label on the act, and I slide them into left to right order. The labels read correctly. I shut the door and leave the hasp alone. I pass the church door at the same time as Harold, returning for a moment. He presses his palm to the glass, checks the knob, nods when it turns, and retreats to his truck with the binder he forgot. I say, Harold, to get his attention. Kier, he says, which is my name, and keeps moving. I don't bring up the reserve stake card or the times. He doesn't ask. The last coordinate waits where I fought with the stake. I walk down the slope, set the puck, log the point, and enter it with the stylus. The timestamp records as 9:11, though the tablet home screen reads 3:41. I enter it as is and leave the field uncorrected. I take the missing flag from my pocket and leave both flags folded in the grass by the corner so whoever does the next pass can use them. I fold the elder's map, carry it to the church door, and slide it into the drop slot. The slot accepts the paper the same way it always does. Nothing sticks. I load the tape, the tablet, and the GPS into the cab and shut the truck door. I wait until the highway bend swallows the last of the sedan. The property manager handed me a single brass key and a photocopied map. Someone had penciled a square near a curve in a gravel road outside Pine Hollow, West Virginia. I signed for the pickup, checked the start time, and headed out with contractor bags, a broom, a short pry bar, and my cousin Tyler's old work gloves stuffed in my back pocket. The job was simple enough. Clear out an old tobacco barn, sort the junk by type, take some photos, lock up. The gate was chained between 2 crooked posts. I parked off to the side, then paced it from my truck's bumper to the barn doors, 30 steps, heel to toe. I jotted 30 in the margin of the work order, just to keep track if anything changed later. The padlock needed a second twist before it clicked open. The doors dragged through packed dirt when I pulled them wide. I set my clipboard on an empty feed bin right inside and made a plan, something I picked up at a warehouse job years ago. 3 piles, 1 aisle. Rope and cloth in the left bay, trash down the center, metal in the right. I labeled 3 contractor bags with masking tape, big block letters so I could see them from anywhere in the room. The only thing I noted but didn't touch was the ladder under the loft opening. I wrote, "Ladder, intact, no action," and circled it. The first half hour was clean and routine. Fill a bag, haul it to the doorway, carry it to the truck, come back the same way. I marked each trip with a tally on the feed bin and on my clipboard. After 5 loads, nothing weird. On the 6th load back in, the clipboard was on the bottom rung of the ladder. I didn't like surprises on a job that only paid for labor. I put it back on the feed bin and set a coil of wire on top so it couldn't wander. I even wrote it down, clipboard relocated to ladder rung unknown. Then I kept working. 2 trips later, the clipboard was lying dead center under the loft opening. The wire coil hadn't moved. I didn't write that one down. I just told myself I must have absent-mindedly moved it and doubled down on sticking to my routine. I started counting my steps again, both ways. 30 out, 26 back, 31 next time. I underlined pace count inconsistent on the margin. When I remeasured from the gate to the doors, I got 28. Measured again, 30. I made myself write it neutrally. Repeat counts vary, cause unknown. No point wasting time debating with distances. I started chalk marking the floor small X's under every object before I moved it, then another line to cross it out once I was done. If anything came back, I'd see it. Near the back wall, I pulled a crate and found 3 sealed envelopes taped underneath. Those went in the save pile for the manager, with the pry bar laid across them so they couldn't slide. When I came back from the truck, The pry bar was there, but the envelopes weren't. Checked the trash, the metal pile, nothing. On a hunch, I walked to the truck. The 3 envelopes were standing upright on the tailgate, like they were posing for a picture. I locked them in the glove compartment. When I got back inside, the ladder wasn't leaning anymore. It was standing upright under the loft opening. No scuffs or drag marks on the floor. I wrote "ladder upright, likely bumped," even though I hadn't felt any bump. A few minutes later, my gloves disappeared from the feed bin while I was testing the edge of a rusty tin. Found them neatly folded on the 5th rung of the ladder, fingers pointing toward the aisle. I put them on and noted, "Gloves found on rung 5. I wanted proof, not just a list of weird things. So I measured the loft opening. First time, 48 inches both ways. Second time, 46.5 by 49. Third time, back to 48 by 48. I pressed the tape hook hard into the wood and counted ladder rungs 10. Top rail flush with the opening. When I climbed to the 3rd rung for a better angle, 2 hands rose over the top rail from the loft side. Palms down, fingers curled tight, a thin scar across the right thumb. They didn't move. They didn't shake. They just stayed there until I lowered the tape, then slid away in one smooth motion. I stepped down without turning my back. Wrote, "2 hands on top rail, duration, several seconds." Then I scratched out "unidentified hands." No commentary, just description. I called the property manager. "Any other keys out?" I asked. "Just yours," he said. "You don't need to go in the loft. Clear what you can reach and leave the rest." Copy. After that, I stuck to a tighter process, marking my tallies in a rectangle so I'd know if they shifted, photographing before and after shots from the same spot on the floor, chalking in batches of 5. Even so, the tallies vanished between trips. Photos came back with timestamps from the future, or 40 minutes in the past. My phone clock jumped back and forth before settling. I stopped taking pictures. In the tool room, I found a coil of baling wire, moved it to the doorway, then came back to find it still on the shelf. I brought it out again. Now I had 2 identical coils. I tied them together and wrote, "Duplicate coil." The chalk marks started changing extra X's I hadn't made. Some shifted inches away. One crate's diagonal line reversed, like it had rotated without scratching the floor. When I drew a second line to make an X, I came back later to find only the original diagonal. No smudges, no explanation. Outside, I ate a granola bar at the tailgate to create a natural pause. Tyler texted he might swing by. I told him to wait at the gate. I timed 2 minutes with my watch. When I flipped my phone over, I had a missed call from a time that hadn't happened yet, and a black photo I hadn't taken. I deleted it. I forced the job toward the finish. Anything that wouldn't stay put, I moved closer to the door. When I set the broom by the threshold, it somehow ended up standing on its own under the loft opening. It wouldn't balance there when I tried. But if I set it under the loft and stepped away, it stayed upright. I set my phone to record it, left for the truck, and got 15 paces out, 22 back. Tyler's truck was at the gate. When I blinked, he was at his tailgate, even though there were no tracks between. The phone had saved nothing but a still image of the broom lying on the floor, time-stamped 2 minutes ahead. The broom was upright again until I picked up the phone, then it fell. That's when I decided if one more measurement changed a 3rd time, I'd stop. The loft opening was back to 48 by 48. The ladder rails 2 inches thick, 10 rungs. I moved it between 2 chalk outlines, waited, and found it hadn't moved. But now there were 4 fingertip-shaped scuffs on the top rail. I carried my last trash bag to the door, noticed it felt wrong, and opened it. Inside were Tyler's gloves. I looked at my hands. I was already wearing Tyler's gloves. Both pairs had the same scuffs, same stitched initial. I locked them in the truck. When I came back, all my chalk lines had been swept into a neat little rectangle by the feed bin. The extra coil was back in the tool room like it had never left. Outside, Tyler called through the gate that he'd be late if I needed him. I told him 20 minutes. Looked up again, he was leaning on my tailgate, studying the map inside my truck, even though the passenger door was closed. I swept a path to the door with my hand brush. The clipboard was gone from the feed bin. It was sitting on the 5th rung of the ladder, same as the gloves earlier. I slid it under my arm and lifted the ladder to move it to the wall. 2 hands appeared again over the top rail, palms flat this time. No wrists, no arms, just steady hands. They stayed there until I stopped moving, then slid away. I finished up without experiments. At the door, I checked once, left bay cleared, right bay stacked, center aisle open. The chalk rectangle still boxed the space where the tallies used to be. The clipboard stayed under my arm. Outside, the gate chain was hooked differently than when I'd arrived. I fixed it. Tyler asked if I needed help. I told him I was done. I closed the barn doors, locked them, tugged once to make sure, and walked straight. I dropped the brass key and the work order in the office box and left. Calder runs the overnight courier route through central Kentucky, and I was halfway through my Friday run when things started to get off. I'd left Lexington with the van packed sealed totes, barcoded envelopes, running the same loop I've driven so many times I barely look at the GPS anymore. Farm supply in Versailles, clinic drop in Midway, courthouse box in Lawrenceburg, then the long stretch toward Harrodsburg. Manifest clipped to the dash, scanner in the passenger seat, everything clicking along like clockwork. Until after mile marker 27, when I took a turn and saw a guy standing on the shoulder. Middle of nowhere, middle of the night, plaid shirt hanging open over a plain t-shirt. No bag, no car, no flashlight. Hands just resting at his sides. He didn't wave me down or move out of the way, just stood there while I rolled past. I glanced in the rear view, half expecting to see him shrinking in the distance, but the mirror showed nothing. Just the white line, the posts, the empty shoulder. I told myself he must have stepped into the ditch. 10 minutes later, the low fuel light blinked on. My favorite station, the one that doesn't feel sketchy, was in Salvisa, so I figured I'd just hold speed and get there without pushing my luck. Dropped the tote at the clinic, scanner beeped, back in the van. Next straight stretch, there he was again. Same plaid shirt hanging open, same exact stillness. I slowed, thinking maybe I'd mistaken him for a fence post the first time. Number. He tilted his head just a little, like a half-hearted nod, and I could see his lips moving but couldn't hear a word through the glass. I kept going. A few miles later, at the crossroads outside Shawnee Run, I saw him a third time, this time on the far side of the intersection, facing right toward me. I actually hit the brakes harder than I meant to, felt the seatbelt catch, because there was no way he'd walked here from the last spot, not in that time. Still, I told myself the normal stuff. Plenty of people wear plaid shirts, some folks wander at night, drop the courthouse box, contactless, scan, slot, photo, done. Manifest, updated. Clock read 12:43 a.m., pulled out, and there he was, again, same spot at that same crossroads I just left. No idea how. This time, instead of going straight, I turned right, hoping to loop out toward Perryville. GPS redrew itself twice, then just stopped showing roads at all, just my little arrow floating on a beige background. Past a field with long rectangular sections marked by fence posts. Around the third post, movement caught my eye, a figure pacing the van from inside the fence line. Not running, not even pushing. Just matching me, step for step, like a treadmill. I sped up slightly. He sped up, slowed down, he slowed too, never looking at me. Fuel gauge suddenly dropped a bar. Flat road, so that shouldn't happen. Decided I'd stop anywhere lit with a working pump. Pulled into a church lot I've used before, killed the engine, started counting my remaining deliveries. Looked up and there were 3 knuckle prints on the driver's window, perfectly spaced, mid-height. I checked mirrors, lot, road, nothing. Out loud, I said, I'm not opening that, because saying it makes it easier to actually follow the rule. Back on the road, and somehow I was back at Shawnee Run again. Same signs, same dented mailbox, same man, head tilted that tiny bit. I chose straight, aiming for Salvisa. Ended up on a stretch lined with barbed wire. Same pacing figure in the field. Fence posts started repeating, like the land had been copy-pasted. Finally, Salvisa's lone lit gas station appeared. Pulled up to pump 2, swiped card, heard the click, gas started flowing. Honestly, the relief was more about having something normal to measure 12 gallons, exactly what I expected. Went inside for a drink, came back out to a trail of wet shoe prints leading from my rear van door into the dark between pumps. Definitely not my tread pattern. Checked the back, everything sealed, barcodes intact. Inside, the clerk asked if I was running the county loop this late. I said yes. He slid the receipt across and tapped it. Time read 1:22 a.m. My dash clock said 12:58. Phone matched the dash. Asked about the time, and he pointed to their security monitor. On the edge of the frame, by my van's rear door, plaid shirt guy, hands at his sides, head tilted. I turned around. Lot was empty. Looked back, monitor showed nothing. Glitch, the clerk said, like he sees weird stuff all the time and can't be bothered. Left the station. GPS kept trying to send me back to that crossroads. Barn with one side caved in showed up on my right. 7 minutes later, same barn again, no turns. Started marking X's on my wrist every time I saw it. 3 X's before I reached another gas station, where the pump only worked after I reparked. Called state police. First call dropped instantly with no log. Second went through, but the guy said my location didn't match any tower read. I gave him landmarks, the barn, the dented mailbox. He told me not to stop for anyone. I told him that was already my plan. Next, straightaway pacing figure again. Rolled the passenger window down a crack. Asked if he needed help. No reaction. Told him I could call someone. Still nothing. Dropped an envelope at the vet clinic. Took the photo. Timestamp was 4 minutes ahead of reality. As I turned back, the clinic's glass door was propped open a few inches, even though it had been latched. I closed it, checked the handle secure. Photo time suddenly matched my dash again. I'd had enough. Decided to cut the loop short and take the interstate. But the on-ramp was past that same cursed crossroads. And of course, there he was. This time, standing dead center on the yellow line. I slowed to a crawl, leaned out. "Move," I said. He didn't move, just said, "You're late." Voice flat, like he was taking attendance. "For what?" I asked. "You missed." "Missed what?" "Left." Head tilt toward the county road I'd been avoiding all night. Against my better judgment, I turned left. Narrow road between fenced parcels. Numbers on gates jumped around like someone had shuffled them. Trip meter ticked backward once. Scanner in the seat pinged on its own, said delivered 1. Then delivered 0. Check totes, everything sealed. Shut it off. He appeared again by a field entrance. Same stance. Same tiny hand shift. I got out, door open. "Tell me where you want to go. I'll flag a deputy. You're late. Then catch me up." "You missed left." "Left where?" Tiny tilt toward a gravel lane barely wide enough for the van. "Not happening," I told him. "You already did." I got back in. Decided I was done with whatever this was. Straight to the interstate. Didn't look into the fields. My name was on the station's Friday close, so I wrapped up the usual counted tills, locked the lottery cabinet, signed off the cash drop, then took the 2-lane back to my rental just outside of Bowling Green. Pulled up by the porch, grabbed my backpack, nuked one of those sad little plastic trays of pasta, cracked an energy drink, and hopped online to game with my friends. I was eating with one hand, running my squad with the other, barely watching the clock. Just checkpoint after checkpoint, the hours melting. Then knock. I told my team to hold up, dropped my headset on the keyboard, and went to the door. A guy was standing at the front window, sort of turned toward me. Through the glass, he said a name, Jake, maybe Jack, and asked if that was me. I shook my head. He just stared for a second, no expression, then walked off the porch, across the gravel, past the fence, and out of view. I shut the blinds and went back to my desk, told my friends. They all got quiet. One of them said, "Lock everything." I hadn't really built that habit here yet, but fine. I got up and did a lap. Deadbolt on the front, chain across, back door locked. Sliding glass bar in the track. Windows checked each one. Kitchen window stuck halfway down, so I shoved it into place until the latch clicked. Guest room window's left latch didn't sit flush, so I jammed a ruler in the track. Garage door interior latch set. I narrated each step in the mic. My friend said good and cued the next match. We kept playing. I drained my drink without noticing, grabbed another from the fridge, told myself one more round, then another knock. Heavy this time. I froze, muted my mic, and walked to the peephole. Same guy. Every few seconds, he'd glance to his right, down along the side of the house, then look forward again, hands close to his jacket. No ringing, no talking, just standing there, glancing right. I backed away, grabbed my phone, called 911, gave them the address, nearest cross street, mile marker. Told them this guy had come earlier asking for someone else's name and was back, looking like he was waiting for somebody. Dispatcher asked if everything was locked. Yes. She told me to stay put, don't open the door, and keep her updated. Another knock. I moved to where I could watch the door from the hallway corner, through the peephole. Still there. This time, his right hand came out, gave a little downward tilt, like a signal, then back in the pocket. Footsteps, along the side of the house. I went to the edge of the kitchen doorway, stood behind the fridge enclosure, told the dispatcher someone was right outside that wall. She said units were on the way from Veterans Outer Loop, gave me an ETA. Then the kitchen window moved. Just a fraction, but it moved. Dropped back onto the latch. Lifted again. Same thing. The ruler held. Then I heard a dull, pushing sound like someone using a tool to pry instead of cut. The wood flexed. Not much noise, but enough to know they were working on it. She asked if they were inside yet. Not yet, but close. She told me to keep my voice low, stay away from the window. I backed up to the dining room threshold. Scanned for something to block the space. Table too heavy. Chair better than nothing. Wedged it under the knob of the kitchen door to the carport. At the front, the guy knocked again. Slow, steady, looked right. Touched his wrist like a time's up gesture. Side window flexed again. Sash twitched, settled crooked. I told her, both sides were active now. She asked about cameras. Nope, I'd never installed the cheap doorbell one I bought. She said to keep reporting. I didn't bother with small talk, just described changes. Front guy stopped knocking, pressed his palm to the glass, held it there. Stepped to the edge of the porch like he might leave, then came back. Side tool shifted, lock clicked inward a hair, stopped. I moved farther back, pulled a heavy box of spare tile across the floor with my foot, set it in the kitchen doorway, put the phone on speaker on the floor so my hands were free. Grabbed a screwdriver, not for defense, but to jam into a hinge if I had to. She gave me another ETA update. I said front guy's tracing a circle on the glass like marking a point. Side shadow moved across the bottom of the window frame. Tool dug again, then stopped. Front guy snapped his head right. Both sets of footsteps pulled back. I stayed put. A patrol car rolled in, lights washing over the yard. The two figures cut across the ditch line and ran out of view. An officer called my address and name. I answered through the door, then unlocked and let them in. They cleared the place, checked outside. Found gouges on the kitchen sash where the tool had been working. Ruler still wedged in place. Took photos. I gave a description. Age, build, jacket, the way he kept glancing right, the hand signals. Timeline matched their logs. They didn't find them. Officer said, from here you could duck into the drainage ditch, pop out beyond sight lines, then cut through to a neighbor's barn and keep moving. Recommended cameras, keeping window stops. I filed an incident report, measured the kitchen window for proper dowels, swapped out the short screws in the strike plate for longer ones while they finished notes. Noticed the door chain was lower than I remembered. Maybe I bumped it, maybe not. Told them, they wrote it down. They asked if anyone else had a key. Just the landlord and his brother, but they're supposed to give notice. No missing packages, no strangers at work asking for me. Got my case number. After they left, I did another lap locks in place, chair bar set, ruler wedged deeper, put my phone to record a time lapse of the front door, told my friends the short version. They asked if I was staying on. Nope, logged off. Nothing else that night. Window stayed put, doors held. Watched until dawn, then hit the hardware store for dowels, a bolt lock, and a wide-angle viewer. Installed everything before lunch. Kept the receipt and window measurements taped inside the kitchen cabinet. A week later, I gave a follow-up by phone, no new leads. My routine changed. Locks first, gaming second. Blinds closed before headset, phone within reach. Months passed. No repeat. I'm still in the same rental on the same road. Still close the station the same way. I don't watch the windows, don't post about it. I keep up the hardware, follow the steps, and sleep when I'm done. On paper, it ended when they left and the cruiser pulled in. That's accurate. The only thing I've kept from it is the order that worked. Knock, verify, lock, call, report, block, wait, open for the uniform, fix the hardware, move forward. If it happens again, I'll do it the same way. That's where it stopped last time. Keys were already hanging on the hook when I walked in. I ran the county's medical courier shift a loop between Moorhead and Hazard, hitting clinics and drop boxes, then back to Lexington before morning processing. Nothing glamorous, nothing unpredictable. Open a bin, scan the label, load the cooler, check the timestamp, lock it back up, move on. That night I had 9 stops, each spaced in a rhythm I could run half asleep. First 3, no surprises. At Rowan Primary, I signed the log, scanned the box, weighed it. At Farmers, the cabinet gave me its usual fight with the key, and inside was the vacuum mailer the nurse promised on the call sheet. West Liberty had a loose tape corner on their box. I fixed it and made a note for the receiving tech. I kept the manifest clipped to the steering wheel so it wouldn't wander off between doors, and my watch synced to the lab's server clock so every printed time matched the courier app exactly. Weirdness started small. The mile markers on KY 519 started repeating. I passed 27, then 28, then 27 again. I double-checked the odometer, glanced at the map, told myself I just misread the first one. But 10 minutes later, there it was, the same roadside produce stand I'd passed months ago, a peach sign painted for August. Thing is, it was October now, and the last time I talked to the owner, he'd said he repainted it weeks back. I figured maybe someone propped an old board up near his property line. Whatever. My job was time stamps and signatures, not sign maintenance. Near Salyersville, GPS offered me a shortcut, 6 minutes saved. It claimed down a county lane I didn't know. I took it. The road was narrow, mostly mailboxes and a one-room church with a yard sign. I popped back onto KY7 where the app said I would, only I'd somehow lost 2 minutes instead of saving 6. I updated the ETA and kept going. Magaffin County Clinic sits behind a school in a cinder block building. After hours, you punch a code to get into the vestibule cabinet. The bag was waiting sealed, barcoded. I scanned it, logged it. Then I turned to sign the ledger and froze. My name was already there. Same quick P, same too tall R, same exact minute as the clock on my phone. I checked for a second entry, maybe 2 bags? Nope, Just the one, and I was holding it. I called dispatch. Magafin's log shows me here already, I told the night operator. Double entry? He asked. It's my name, my handwriting. Take a photo, bring the bag, I'll note it. I snapped a shot of the signature with the bag in frame, locked the cabinet, and moved on. Ledger mix-ups happen, just usually not with my handwriting. The road to Jackson snakes in an S-curve. I know exactly where it ends, except that night, it didn't. GPS said 3 miles to the next turn, then suddenly 6 without me turning. Every time I passed the volunteer firehouse, the ETA jumped around. Odometer said I was fine. I chalked it up to a GPS hiccup. At Breathitt County Health, 2 padded mailers were waiting. One name I recognized, the other was new. Scanned both. The app created a stop 5 ampere out of nowhere. Then dispatch called me without me calling first. System says you took a side road earlier, he said. Yeah, brief GPS detour. What's 5 ampere? Auto log. Just a split. Keep going. I signed the ledger. Only one fresh signature, this time mine. Coolers were fine, ice still good. I left a note about the extra stat. Between Jackson and Hazard, I saw the same billboard twice, a mining museum ad. The second time, part of the name was missing, like a letter had blown off. No storm that week. I just drove past. Hazard's clinic usually solves any hiccups, staff nearby, quick fixes. But tonight, the cabinet was already open, cooler on the shelf with a slip on the handle. Return to lab Vesper. Underneath, a second slip, already picked up Vesper. Same handle, 2 slips. The cooler was bone dry. The scanner pinged an error duplicate code, supposedly already on my vehicle. My count said otherwise. No match in my load. Dispatch again. Hazard shows I picked up an empty cooler I don't have. System has you scanning it at 2214, the operator said. Passive scan. I don't have it. Mark as exception. Move on. Fine. At a gas station, I grabbed tape for a weak box. My receipt timestamp was an hour ahead of my watch. Clerk swore his register was synced to satellite. My phone and lab clock matched each other. I left it. Leaving Hazard, GPS tried to send me toward Jackson for 3 miles, then back south. Whatever. I followed the correction. The only things bothering me now were Magafin's ledger and the phantom cooler. Near an old drive-in, the road split. I took my usual right fork and wound up at an unfamiliar T-junction. Tried the left fork, same T-junction from the other side. Third try, I stopped to reset GPS. When it reloaded, it put me back at the drive-in. I rolled forward expecting the lot and passed the firehouse again. Same fundraiser date as weeks ago. I ditched GPS. Mileposts and my printed route notes kept me steady until I saw the drive-in again. This time, the screen advertised a movie they hadn't shown in years. I didn't stop. Took a road that shouldn't connect back toward Jackson and somehow landed at a rail crossing near Ravenna way too soon for the miles I'd driven. GPS showed me floating between 2 counties. Dispatch again. I'm 34 miles from Hazard and my landmarks are wrong. I see you as stationary, he said. Last scan Hazard 2214. Hold if you need an officer. Number, just the route. A supervisor cut in. You're carrying 2 stats. Temps are fine. Skip Knott County, go straight to Lexington. I agreed. A mile later, I passed that same one-room church from the earlier detour, only now its yard sign had the service time from last month. I took a photo, sent it to dispatch. No reply. Stopped for a restroom at a county maintenance lot. Office door was locked, blinds tilted. Through the gap, I saw a clipboard. Looked exactly like my courier manifest, but filled out to the end with neat notes in handwriting that could have been mine. Drive in again, church again. Repeat mile 27. Back to Hazard. Last line, delivered to lab 032. I checked my watch. If I hit the interstate now, I'd arrive exactly 032. No one was there to open the office. I didn't force it. Back in my car, I flipped through my manifest. My scribbles were all there. But then a slip of paper slid out. A duplicate of the hazard, already picked up Vesper tag this time with a new line, returned to lot after drop. I don't carry pre-printed slips. They're always printed at clinics. This one matched hazard's printer quirks perfectly. Dispatch again. That slip in my manifest, was it from you? No, the supervisor said. Go straight home after the lab. Do not return to any county lot. I sent a photo. Not issued by us, she replied. On the way to the interstate, I passed that peach sign again, only now today's date was freshly scrawled on the bottom. I slowed just to be sure. Then I ignored GPS entirely. Mileposts fell in proper order. The on-ramp came up, GPS finally locked in, and the rest of the drive to Lexington stayed clean. No repeats, no wrong signs. At the lab intake, I backed in. Coolers opened, temps shown, bags handed off. I mentioned the extra stat and the hazard cooler exception. The intake tech scanned them, frowned. System says you already brought that hazard cooler in an hour ago, he said. I didn't. I see the note. But system still logged it. We checked the racks. No cooler. He printed a reconciliation sheet I signed. Then he reached for my manifest to staple the copy. And there it was, under my last scribbled stop time, a line I never wrote. Delivered to lab, 032. Same handwriting as mine. The station clock read exactly 032. He didn't say a word. Just stapled, handed it back. I slid the manifest under the clip, shut the cooler lids, set the keys on the counter, and locked the bay door behind me. Then I walked to my car. My cousin's friend Evan needed someone to watch his place while he took a work contract out west. His cabin sat way off Low Gap Road in the Ozark Highlands, a narrow gravel turn you could miss even if you were looking for it. The driveway was so long you couldn't see the cabin from the road, just a line of rusted barbed wire fence and two leaning cedar posts holding a steel gate. Evan said it was simple: check the mail, water the tomato boxes if it didn't rain, and feed the two barn cats twice a day. When he handed me the keys, he added something that wasn't on the list. Don't go past the tree line after dark, he said, and if anyone knocks on the back door at night, don't open it. He didn't smile, didn't explain. Just looked at me like he wanted to be sure I heard him the first time. I wrote the warning at the bottom of his note because something in the way he said it made me want to keep it close. I moved in on a Monday. The cats greeted me at the barn, circling my boots while I poured kibble into two dented metal bowls. The inside of the cabin was clean but bare, two small bedrooms, a sofa, a narrow kitchen with a single window over the sink. I kept my bag by the front door and slept on the sofa. That first night, I locked the gate with the chain Evan showed me, checked the deadbolts twice, and kept the keys in my pocket even while I slept. By the second day, I'd started counting steps between landmarks, something I always do in new places. 53 from the porch to the mailbox, 40 from the porch to the barn. I wrote the numbers on the back of Evan's list. The next morning, the bowls I'd stacked small inside big the night before were reversed, big inside small. I restacked them without saying anything out loud, though I caught myself glancing at them more than once. Wednesday, I found the mailbox open to the second hinge notch instead of the third. Inside was a circular about burn permits that had expired a year ago. It had Tuesday's postmark but a county seal I'd never seen. I put it on the counter and forgot about it until later that night when I thought about Evan's warning again. That same evening, the gate chain felt shorter in my hands, just one link, but I noticed. And when I fed the cats, I counted 48 steps to the barn instead of 40. I walked it twice more, got the same number, and wrote it down. Thursday, I went into Marsden for groceries. The truck's dash clock said I left at 2:15. My phone said 2:41. Back at the cabin, I reset them all to 2:30 exactly. By the time I reached the porch, the phone was still at 2:30, and the truck said 2:33. I started logging the times: phone, watch, truck, stove, clock, 3 times a day. I didn't try to explain it, just wrote numbers. That night, I woke suddenly, like someone had tapped my shoulder. The cabin was quiet. The list lay face down on the table. The keys were still in my pocket. I checked every door and window, touching each lock with the back of my hand. Everything was secure. Friday morning, I saw them barefoot prints in the soft dirt by the back steps. Small, not a child's exactly, but smaller than my own foot by a few inches. They stopped at the second riser, like whoever made them had been lifted away. I measured the stride with my palm and wrote it down. That night, I fed the cats early, moved the bowls inside, and set a chair under the back doorknob. I slid the deadbolt and pressed against the door until the frame hummed. At dusk, I locked the gate and checked the chain twice. Around midnight, the knocking came. Slow, deliberate, with long pauses between each knock. Tap, pause, tap, pause. 6 times in total. I stayed in the hallway, not moving. When it stopped, I waited another 10 minutes before checking. The chain, bolt, and chair were all exactly as I'd left them. Saturday, the prints outside were blurred from the night air, but I noticed one faint crescent mark where a heel had slid before being reset. Later, I took the trash to the road. When I came back, the bag I'd tied was sitting neatly on the back stoop. Same knot, same weight. I opened it, everything was exactly what I'd thrown away. That night, the knocks came at the front door. Same rhythm, same count. I sat in the hallway again, listening until they stopped. Sunday morning, the mailbox was full circulars dated 2 months ago. A county notice about road closures for streets that didn't exist anywhere nearby. I sorted them by postmark while running a timer on my phone. After 6 minutes, I reset it using the stove clock. After another 6, I used the truck clock. All 3 ended at different times. Monday, I tried to keep things ordinary, fed the cats, washed the bowls, folded Evan's dish towels into thirds the way he liked. When I took the trash to the road, the same bag was waiting in the bin again. I brought it back without opening it, set it under the table, and placed a concrete block on top. That evening, the cats didn't show at their feeding time. I waited by the barn, counting out loud to 40. On 36, both appeared at the bowls, already eating. I hadn't seen or heard them arrive. I marked it in my notes, certainty wrong. That night, I didn't lie down. I stood in the hallway between the 2 doors. First, the knocks came at the front, slow, spaced, deliberate. Then, seconds later, at the back. Same count, same pauses. When they stopped, I went to the back door and looked through the glass. A figure stood at the tree line, perfectly centered. Feet together, shoulders squared, facing the house. It didn't move, didn't tilt its head or raise a hand, just stood there, holding its place like it was waiting for something else to happen. I stepped back, checked the chain, the bolt, the chair. All were in place. I returned to the front room. Tuesday morning, I carried the tied trash bag to the truck and drove it into Marsden. I threw it into the dumpster behind the hardware store, watched it drop in, and drove back. When I got inside, it was under the table again, concrete block still on top. I decided that night would be my last. I packed my bag, put a spare truck key and a battery pack in my pocket, and kept the main keys with me. I fed the cats early, locked every door and window, and set the chair back under the back knob. Full dark had just settled when I walked to the gate for the last time. The chain was looped exactly as Evan had shown me. The lock clicked closed easily. I turned back toward the cabin, and at the 3rd step up the porch, I saw a wet, barefoot print on the dry wood. I stepped over it and went inside. The knocks began almost immediately. Front door first, then back, alternating. Same count, same pauses. When they stopped, I walked to the back door and looked out again. 2 figures now, both standing at the tree line, side by side, facing the house. I backed away, tightened my grip on the keys, and took my bag to the front door. Then, the back doorknob turned a 1/4 inch. The chain lifted slightly, then settled. Turned the other way, lifted again, settled again. No pounding, no force. Just that small test of what held it shut. I knew then I'd reached the point where staying meant becoming part of whatever was happening. I opened the front door, stepped out, and closed it behind me without looking back. I walked straight down the drive, keeping to the center of the gravel. At the gate, the lock was hanging open. I didn't think about it. I just pulled the chain free, swung the gate wide, and got in the truck. I didn't check the mirrors until I hit pavement. By then, the gate was just a shape in the dark behind me. I didn't slow down until I reached the highway, and I've never gone back. The job came through a mutual acquaintance. A couple heading to New Mexico for a week needed someone to look after their border collie, Rook, and keep the house running. The pay was decent. I was between jobs, and they seemed normal enough, so I said yes. Their place was deep in Wythe County, Virginia. The highway narrowed to 2 lanes. Then those 2 lanes turned into a twisting strip of cracked asphalt where you hoped no one came the other way. By the time I reached the black mailbox with their name taped under plastic, my phone screen was frozen. The driveway stretched almost a quarter mile through open pasture before ending at a big white 2-story house. They were friendly, the type who apologized for bad reception as if they'd personally caused it. They gave me the rundown: feed Rook twice a day, keep the wood stove stocked, bring in the mail. If a package came, sign for it. The locks were old but fine, and a spare key hung on a nail in the mudroom. They showed me the breaker box, the water shutoff, and the pump switch in the cellar. No neighbors close by, just 2 farms beyond the pasture. They left after dark, taillights disappearing down the gravel, and it was just me and Rook. That first evening, I fed him and walked the driveway to get a feel for the place. The fields were fenced, the grass tall and still. On the way back, I saw him. A man was on the driveway about 30 yards ahead, walking toward the road. Camo jacket, mud-caked boots, head angled low. The gravel crunched under his steps, but he never looked at me, never slowed, just walked dead center down the drive until the curve in the trees swallowed him. It didn't make sense. The driveway wasn't shared, it ran from the road to the house. If he'd been on the road, I'd have seen him earlier, which meant he'd come from the house's direction. I tightened my grip on Rook's leash, got him inside, and locked the door. Then I stood at the upstairs window for nearly an hour, staring at the strip of gravel vanishing into dark. I told myself maybe he'd been hunting and crossed without thinking, but my chest stayed tight. The next day was quiet. I didn't walk Rook, didn't even open the curtains facing the driveway. By evening, I decided to settle in. The enclosed back porch had an old wood stove, so I lit a small fire. The dry oak smell filled the air, and Rook sprawled out beside me. For an hour, the crackle of the fire and his slow breathing made the place feel almost normal. Eventually, Rook wandered inside, and I stayed to tend the fire. Close to midnight, his barking ripped through the quiet, sharp, fast bursts that made my arms prickle. I left the stove burning and ran inside, following the sound upstairs. He was in the spare bedroom at the far end of the hall, planted in the middle of the floor, facing the closet. His body was stiff, tail tucked. Another bark shot out, louder, bouncing off the walls. The closet door was shut, but the wood frame had shifted over the years. There was a thin, uneven gap along the edge. I stepped closer. Through that narrow space, something looked back. An eye level with mine, unmoving, catching the faintest light. I slammed the door so hard the hangers rattled. Rook yelped when I grabbed his collar, but I didn't stop. We tore down the stairs, out the front door, and into my car. By the time I hit the gravel, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the headlights straight. I drove until my phone lit up with service, then called 911. The deputies met me back at the house. They searched everything: closets, attic, basement, under the porch. No one was there. No footprints in the yard, no forced entry. One of them asked if maybe I'd been tired. I wasn't tired. I stayed at a motel that night. When I came back in the morning with one of the deputies, I noticed things I hadn't before. The wood pile on the porch was 2 logs short, though I hadn't lit a fire upstairs. The bowls I'd left lined up in the kitchen were shifted water dish, a finger's width forward, food bowl to the side. The spare key that had hung on the mudroom nail was on the floor directly beneath it, teeth down, as if dropped straight without bouncing. We found nothing else. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the man on the driveway and the eye in the closet until the 3rd night. I decided to keep a notepad on the kitchen counter, marking every small thing: mail count, wood count, clock set to the same time. Before bed, I'd aligned everything: bowls, shoes, even the remote on the arm of the couch. Around 2 a.m., I woke to silence. Rook wasn't on the rug. My shoes, which I'd left toes out by the bedroom door, were now toes in, exactly half a shoe length closer to the threshold. Downstairs, the kitchen chairs were pulled slightly from the table, each by a different amount, as though someone had walked past and brushed them. The mail from earlier was in the same stack except for one envelope, gone. I didn't sleep again that night. The next day, the missing envelope was back, placed neatly on top of the pile. No one had come. At least, no one I saw. Later that afternoon, a delivery driver asked if the other helpers still needed the package. I told him I was the only one here. He frowned, said a man in a cap had signed for something 2 days ago, then shrugged and handed me the box. That evening, I walked Rook to the curve in the lane. I counted 127 steps to the bend. On the way back, I counted again. This time, 134 to the same spot. When we reached the porch, the screwdriver I'd left flat on the rail as a marker was standing upright, perfectly balanced in the wood crack. I put it back flat. That night, I locked every door, wedged a chair under the mudroom knob, and kept the spare key in my pocket. It was near midnight when Rook barked again, same sharp bursts, same urgency. He was upstairs in the far room, facing the closet. The gap in the door frame was just enough to see through, and I stared back. I didn't think. I slammed the door, felt it jump in the frame, and yanked Rook out of the room. We went straight down the stairs, through the mudroom, shoving the chair aside and out the back door. I locked it behind us without looking up. We crossed the yard fast. I opened the back car door, pushed Rook inside, and got behind the wheel. I didn't stop until the signal bars returned on my phone. Bram usually takes the long drives in our family, but this time the southbound leg through Kentucky was on me. I kicked things off the way I always do, fluids topped, tire pressure logged in my little pocket notebook, odometer written down, GPS locked onto a route that dodged construction. Everything ran like clockwork until my fuel gauge started sinking faster than it should. By the time I crossed the next county line, I was doing the math in my head and didn't like the result. GPS showed one option ahead, a place called Dover Crossing. Never heard of it. The icon sat on a tiny side road, peeling away from the highway like a loose thread. I hate pushing into reserve, so I turned off. The road narrowed to a single strip of asphalt with grass crowding both sides. No houses, no barns, nothing but the distance on the GPS counting down. When it finally said I'd arrived, the map showed a neat little square one store, 2 gas pumps, and 3 other buildings. And yeah, that's exactly what I saw. Good enough. I pulled next to a pump and set the brake. Big paper sign on the card reader, PAY inside only. I like paying outside, less small talk, but when a reader's busted, it's busted. I went inside. The place felt like someone had paused mid-shift. There were flattened boxes stacked behind the counter, a rack with local maps, and a corkboard by the door with a notice about proper tank grounding. Register sat ready, receipt tape loaded. No bell over the door, so no cheery ding announcing me. I called out, "Hello?" and stood by the card terminal. Gave it a good minute, nobody came. Walked the aisle, still nobody. What I did find, a weekly schedule that ended 2 months ago, a little safe under the counter with the keyhole taped over in blue, and a tray with a handwritten note, cash only if card fails. The terminal itself was working fine, so I tapped my card, typed in 2 for my pump, and got an approved screen. Oddly, the timestamp on the receipt was 2 minutes ahead of my watch. Not exactly a scandal, so I pocketed it and went back out. Gas flowed fine. While it ran, I did my usual loop around the car, checked the tires, roof rack, rear hatch. That's when I noticed I was parked just a hair crooked. My tracks on the pavement didn't quite line up with the old stains. Not worth losing sleep over. I finished, hung up the nozzle. The pump total didn't match my receipt off by 38 cents. I decided the paper was official and shrugged it off. I went back in for water. Everything looked the same, except the steel door behind the counter. Earlier, it had an out-of-service sign on it. Now, nothing. The handle was tilted up like someone had just let go. I glanced at the floor in case the sign fell. Nope. I called out again, set my items and the old receipt on the counter, and waited. Still nobody. I paid at the terminal and bagged my own stuff. The corner cameras had cheap red plastic casings, the fake kind you can buy online, so I doubted anyone was watching. On my way out, I glanced at the corkboard again. There was now a second page pinned under the grounding notice, emergency contacts. Just 3 first names, Rudy, Mina, cart with local area codes. I took a photo, thinking I'd email it to the owner later. Stepping outside, I saw my car, and a man. He was standing right at my rear quarter panel, faded baseball cap, jacket zipped to the neck, hands in his pockets. His stance looked casual, but his eyes were locked on my driver's door handle. I gave him a little nod. Nothing back. Didn't move. Just stayed there. I walked a wide arc around the back of my car. My fob set to unlock only the driver's door, so I slid in quick, bag in my lap, doors locked. He shifted slightly but didn't speak. Didn't even look at me now, his focus stayed on that handle. Then I noticed the reflection in the station's glass doors. Someone was in the doorway inside. They hadn't been there seconds ago. Just standing dead center in the threshold, still as stone. The face, well, I won't dress it up, but it wasn't the slack look of a bored cashier. Something else my pump number had changed. It was 2 when I got there. Now the metal plate read 3. The other pump's plate read 2. They'd swapped. Bolts were solid, no swinging. I glanced at my GPS now, showing the forecourt as an empty gray block. No station name, no road. I looked back up. The man by my car had turned toward the doorway. The person in the doorway hadn't moved, yet they were standing 1 tile over from where they'd been. The steel door behind the counter was cracked open now. Through the gap, I could see a stairwell going down something that made no sense given the building's size on the map. I started the engine. The man stayed put, backed out slowly, steering clear of the pumps. In my mirrors, the person in the doorway shifted by exactly 1 more tile. 4 orange wheel chocks had appeared at the lot's edge, arranged in a perfect diamond, narrowing the exit. I eased through without touching them. The GPS plotted a straight shot to the highway, then blinked into a zigzag of fake streets. The map rotated twice before locking in. I kept my speed even. Glancing back, the station looked exactly as it had 2 pumps, the rectangle store and 3 buildings. Out front, the 2 figures stood the same distance apart, as if someone had measured it. A mile from the highway, I passed a handmade sign nailed to a post, Town Office 2. The arrow pointed away from my route. Next bend, another sign, Church. That road should have dead-ended. My odometer ticked forward 1/10, then backward 1/10. I marked it in my notebook, then stopped bothering. 1 more curve and I passed a county truck on the shoulder, hood up, empty cab. The license plate was taped over in blue, same tape from the safe in the store. Finally, the GPS calmed down, showing the ramp less than a mile away. One last glance in the mirror, both figures still there, still apart by that same gap. I hit a marker reading county maintenance limit, then another with the state road number. My phone lit up with delayed notifications.